Hey everybody, co-host Corey here. I just wanted to tee up this episode real quick for you all. So this is episode 6 of our Patreon exclusive series called The Carpenter Factor. In this series, Zach and I go through every single movie that John Carpenter directed, starting with Dark Star and ending with the episode of Suburban Screams that he directed. There are 26 episodes over on our Patreon page. That includes our wrap-up episode. And you can find them all under the Auteur de Force tier. Again, that's patreon.com/podcastingafterdark. And now that we are done with John Carpenter's entire filmography, we are on to our next auteur, and that is Don Coscarelli. If you're listening to this when it kind of just drops on the free feed, we just released our Jim, the World's Greatest review. And we'll, obviously move forward with Kenny and Company, Phantasm, Beastmaster, everything. We're going to go through Don Coscarelli's entire filmography in order, just like we did John Carpenter. So swing on over to Patreon, patreon.com/podcastingafterdark, and sign up to the Auteur de Force tier. You have 26 episodes of The Carpenter Factor waiting for you, and help support the show. Thank you so much to everyone who's already signed up and listened to the series and given us feedback on it. We love it. We love hearing from you all, and we really appreciate it. So thank you, and hope you enjoyed this discussion on The Fog. And of course, go follow Tim over at Talking Back. He's a great guy. He puts on a great show with his brother Dean, and I love that show. I love Talking Back. They're always talking about some fun stuff, so go check them out as well. So without further ado, I give you The Carpenter Factor, Episode 6, The Fog.
The Blast from Our Past Network.
Welcome to Podcasting After Dark presents The Carpenter Factor, a Patreon-exclusive series where we look at the complete filmography of John Carpenter. Month after month, we'll review each film as part of a whole body of work instead of an individual piece of cinema. Thank you for signing up for this tier and supporting your favorite cult movie podcast. And now, enjoy The Carpenter Factor.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to this month's episode of Podcasting After Dark presents The Carpenter Factor. We are tackling The Fog. I am one half of the Pad Proper team. Joined with me, as always, is Zach, the Total Snackage Schaefer. What's up, buddy?
I feel like I'm going to talk like a drunk Holbrook for the whole episode. What? Then give me my bottle. Where's my bottle? I'm feeling good. Feel excited. Talk about one of my favorite Carpenter movies.
Well, the good thing is we have a sober Tim from Talking Back. Hey. Just kidding. Zach is not drunk. I might be by the end of the episode, though. So, Tim, my man, what's up, buddy? How you doing?
I'm good. Who said I was sober?
Oh, cheers, boys. Cheers.
I'm drinking coconut water right now.
Oh, boo.
Ooh. Yeah, no.
Go ahead, Tim. Please,
no,
enlighten us.
No, I was just going to say, I'm doing good. I'm here for a stomach pounder and a Coke and to have a good time.
Oh.
Good reference. Good.
That's a great
reference. Good one.
Yes, ma'am. Mom, can I have a stomach pumper and Coke?
So, Tim, from Talking Back, he has a podcast with his brother Dean. I have been on that show a couple times, and I will be on it again. What, buddy?
I want to be on more often.
It's fun. It's a fun show.
We can have you on more often.
I would love to.
But Tim, tell the audience a little bit about Talking Back.
Yeah, sure. Talking Back is a podcast, as you mentioned, I do with my brother Dean, and we talk movies, comics, video games, and more, mostly retro. We drop a new episode every Monday. We've got close to, 180 now. And yeah, if you like any of that stuff, if you like movies, if you like comics, if you like video games, and you want to hear more, check out our podcast.
So one thing that I love that you guys do is you walk through franchises, and it's not just And you don't usually do it like back to back, but you do it over the course of time and you'll walk through a franchise. And right now, during the course of this year, 2020, you guys are walking through the entire Star Wars franchise, every movie, including Solo and Rogue One. Right now, you guys, I think by the time everyone's listening to this, the New Hope episode was already out. So next month will be Empire Strikes Back. So go check that out. You all know how much we love Star Wars over here at Podcasting After Dark. We don't talk about it too much, though, do we, Zach?
We don't, but now that my son is pretty much into Star Wars full time, thanks to the Obi-Wan TV show, crazy enough.
Yeah.
And I said to him, I'm like, who's your favorite Star Wars character? He goes, Obi-Wan. I'm like, that's cool. That's super cool. So we've watched 1, 2, and 3, finished the Obi-Wan series, and now we're on to New Hope.
Okay, so you're walking through the franchise too, but you're starting with episode 1 with Bodhi.
Yeah, and now, but then we watched the trailer for Clone Wars, the cartoon, so we might go into that for a while.
That's
He
awesome.
wants to watch it all.
That's a good decision.
Yeah.
That's a good decision.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's given me a whole new perspective on the franchise, watching it with him through his eyes. So a greater appreciation from a kid's perspective, and less cynical, sarcastic from a 40-some-odd perspective.
Yeah, definitely.
Like certain friends of ours.
I know. I was going to say, Zach, I know who you're referencing. TV Obscura. So, Tim, have you shown your son Star Wars?
I did, yeah. So, like in preparation of our walkthrough of Star Wars, I jammed all the movies in about a 2-week period and did start from episode 1 with my son. I explained to him Star Wars and the way that the movies came out, and episode 4, 5, and 6 came out first. Laid it out there and asked him how he wanted to watch it. He wanted to watch it in chronological order. He had already been Darth Vader for Halloween. He's got a Darth Vader costume. I don't even know where he learned about Darth Vader, to be honest with you, but he just loves Darth Vader. So we went through all 9 movies, and yeah, Zach is 100% correct. Just seeing him experience these moments that, you know, we sometimes take for granted, and also seeing it in chronological order, which, you know, I don't think any, you know, of the 3 of us here got to do. It was fascinating just watching the expression on his face when certain things happened that were really impactful in chronological order. So when it was all said and done, I had a greater respect for the entire franchise, being able to kind of see it, you know, along with him and see what's working for him and what didn't work for him.
What's his favorite one so far? Favorite movie?
His favorite movie, I think
Attack of the Clones.
I'm trying to remember.
Bodhi's.
I think he really liked Revenge of the Sith, and
he is his father's
Empire.
son, isn't he?
Well, he likes what I like. He likes Vader a lot, and Anakin actually. When the Emperor turned Anakin and said, "You are now Darth Vader," I was just looking at him instead of the TV, and I've never seen his jaw drop more than that moment. And it was so rewarding just to see him experience that moment the way it was meant to be experienced.
Yeah, Bodhi had the exact same reaction. He goes, he looks cool. He looks cool like that. I'm like, okay, sure. I will say, if you've never seen the Lego Star Wars trilogy, that's very entertaining. I'm sure it's free on Disney Plus at this point, but it covers all of the first 6 movies, and then takes place right after Return of the Jedi.
Okay.
Cool.
It's great. It's a great fun recap, and it really pokes fun at the things that should be poked fun at, and it's also a nice homage.
Nice.
I'll just throw in before we move on. I showed my nephew. He's 6. I think he's about a half a year, maybe a full year younger than both of your sons. We showed him A New Hope, Empire Strikes Back, and Return of the Jedi. Took a little break, showed him Tron. Tron hit so hard for him. Never thought it would. Star Wars did, but not like mega hard. But I think that the prequels will do a good job with him. We're going to show them that soon. But one thing I found very interesting, because we didn't like show them back to back, we watch them like once a month, you know, we'll have a movie night. So in between Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi, he kept talking like, he was like, I think Darth Vader was lying to Luke. I don't think he's really his father. And I was like, oh, that's an interesting perspective. Like, yeah, I never even thought of that, because we've all lived with the knowledge pretty much our entire lives. So I was like, that's cool. I like, you know, seeing it from a different perspective like that.
I just watched this documentary, In Search of like science fiction. It's the guys that made the In Search of Tomorrow. Yeah, I just got it in the mail, and Bodhi wanted to watch it, and they cover the Star Wars movies, and they threw some facts in there that I didn't know about. Did you know that Mark Hamill and Carrie Fisher were signed to a 3-picture deal, but Harrison Ford was signed to a single picture deal, so that each time he basically could renegotiate. That's why they put him in the carbon.
Yeah, because they didn't know if he was coming back or not.
That's cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and then Lucas didn't want to make any more Star Wars movies, and that's why he killed off Boba Fett the way he did.
Yeah, because you know he was burnt out by the time Return of the Jedi came around. He was fully burnt out, because he was on record saying that the series was going to be 12 movies, and then he was later on record saying it was only going to be 6. You know, with the prequels. I think he was just getting burnt out from Star Wars.
He got burnt out after, you know, the first one. He relinquished the directorial task to Lawrence Kasdan at that point, because he was Kasdan.
Yeah, Lawrence Kasdan wrote, and then Irvin Kershner directed.
Kershner, that's right.
Empire.
Kershner directed it. Yeah, so he passed it over because he was exhausted. So.
Yeah.
Well, he made a good call. He made a good call, Ripley.
Yeah, I was going to say, unlike Burke Carter J. So, guys and gals, that was 10 minutes of Star Wars, but I mean, I think all three of us can talk Star Wars for a pretty long time, but we're not talking Star Wars tonight. We are talking 1980s The Fog.
We're talking my Star Wars tonight.
There you go. That's a great analogy, actually. Zach, you mentioned that it's one of your favorites. I'll just say that I've only seen The Fog probably 3 or 4 times. I'd say this is probably my 4th time watching it. I texted Zach offline earlier. I said, this is one of those movies that I dig more and more every single time I watch it. But it was never heavy in my rotation as a kid. I probably watched The Thing, you know, much more. But probably like, we watched it during our Carpenter Factor that we always talk about, that we did a few years ago, and that was probably the only time, or the first time in my adult life that I'd seen it. I watched the remake, thought that was absolute trash, never need to watch that again. But Tim, what's your experience with The Fog?
So, before I mention that, I will say that I am a huge John Carpenter fan. He is one of my favorite directors. Very near the top, but this was my first time watching The Fog 2 days ago.
Cool. That's awesome.
So
I almost did a spit take.
Yes, he did. I almost saw it.
I was expecting that. Being a kid in the 80s, basically for me meant that it was hard to follow your favorite director, because to be honest with you, I didn't even really know what a director did. So what I was doing for the most part was I was following actors, because that's who's on the VHS cover and the back. That's who, I see the face, and that's what I rent. So to be completely honest with you, I learned about John Carpenter through Kurt Russell and his roles in Carpenter movies. And then from there, I branched out to some other Carpenter movies, as I could, but this was just one that I never saw. And I have seen, half his library, so I've missed a good chunk of his movies. But I'll be honest here, if I didn't get the invite to come on this episode and talk The Fog, there's a very good chance that I wouldn't have ever watched this movie. And I'm very grateful for that opportunity, just to be able to see this movie, because I think it's amazing. And I've been living and breathing The Fog for the past couple of days.
That's freaking awesome. Now, real quick, before Zach goes into a giant diatribe about how much he loves this movie, had you ever seen the Craptastical remake?
No, I definitely wasn't going to just jump to that. I would have gone to the original. And I didn't, it's not like I heard anything bad about it. I actually didn't hear a lot about The Fog, but it just, now with so much content out there and you know, having a podcast, I probably only would have watched it if it was for the podcast. And, you know, I don't think we were going to get there anytime soon. So easily could have just missed it forever. It would have been very sad and tragic.
Zach, my man. I know it's not your favorite. It's not your favorite Carpenter movie, but
it's not. And I will say really quickly, the remake of The Fog is a perfect example of when people get angry at remakes, because not all remakes are bad. Case in point, The Thing.
Yep.
But the Fog remake is in my opinion the worst remake ever made. Period.
Wow.
And it's not because it actually is not because of the fact that this is one of my favorite Carpenter films, but it is a god-awful piece of trash that should never have been made. And I rarely shit on a movie so heavily, but I will on that one, because I'm just like, from top to bottom, it's terrible.
Can I just throw in real quick about the remake? The only time I ever watched it was when I was working at the porn store, and all I ask for is a movie to just fucking entertain me enough to make it through the monotony of the day. And it didn't even do that. Like, it's that boring of a movie.
It is just god awful. And I will arm wrestle anybody who disagrees with me.
I don't think anyone does.
You're right. So my history with The Fog, really quickly, or as quickly as I can put it, it is. I saw it as a child. I've watched it at least every other year for decades upon decades. I would say it is the most kid-friendly, R-rated John Carpenter horror film out there. If you're going to introduce a Carpenter film to a child, it's still terrifying as hell, and it will give them nightmares, guaranteed. I used to recite the intro by John Houseman to my kindergarten students. And there was one, because we used to get these rolling fogs that would come by our classroom window. And one day the fog was so thick that it literally was going by the door, and the door was open. And I turned all the lights off and I gave my speech. It scared the shit out of all the kids because the fog started coming in right at that moment. It was like clockwork, kismet, you know? So I love this movie top to bottom. And I'm very critical about it too. Like, I'll have some things to say that I think are not necessarily bad, but just more like wonderings. And then I had some moments today for the first time, and I've probably seen this movie 40, 50 times, that I never noticed ever. It was like some revelations today where I'm like, holy shit, I never noticed that. So I can't wait to dig into it.
That's the sign of a great movie, when you see it so many times and yet you still pick things out of it. And oftentimes, you know, when you're in different kind of states of your life, you're able to view the movie differently and pick up on certain things that, you know, your old self, you know, couldn't clue in on, but now you're a bit different and you pick up on things.
Totally. And like Corey said, it was just, you know, I enjoy it more and more every time I watch it. And Tim, I'm glad you finally saw it for the first time.
Me too, man.
And Zach, funnily enough, you mentioned you think it's a kid-friendly movie. I was watching it, and I've been thinking lately, because my nephew, we show him movies. It's like what we do. He really wants to watch Aliens because he knows I love it. I'm still a little bit on the fence, and it's more for pacing and time. I don't know if he's going to sit there for 2.5 hours, you know? But I was watching this because I was been thinking lately, I was like, I want to introduce him to horror soon, you know? He loved Monster Squad, fucking loved it, but that's not really horror. But no. I was watching this, I was like, it's not that graphic. It's not that violent. And I'm not saying I want to show it to him this year or next year, but I'm like, I can maybe show it to him within 3 years or something, you know? Maybe by the time he's 10 or something, and start actually focusing on some horror movies.
Yeah, I think 10's a safe age. I think 10's a safe age to share this movie. I will again reiterate, it's the tamest of John Carpenter's R-rated horror films. You know, I think if you're ever going to introduce a movie of his catalog to people, like his good catalog, you could start with Big Trouble in Little China. You know, that would be the best one to go with to start with.
For a kid, because it has some horror elements that kind of can get them a little bit, you know, used to said horror elements.
Yeah, and then, some of the subject matter, it is what it is, but,
Yeah.
as you're dealing with some sex, and you are in this as well, maybe some underage sex, perhaps, depending on Jamie Lee Curtis's character. But nevertheless, I think this one, if you took the sound effects out, it would be even more kind of acceptable. It's really the sound effects. This movie is a perfect example, in my opinion, of less is more, and what you can do with audio, and how you create this you can do so much with so little. That was why the remake just destroyed me, because I'm like, you're doing CGI fog when the original director probably shot this thing for a fraction of the budget of that movie and made magic out of it.
Oh yeah, and I've got some tidbits on how they made said magic, but we'll get into all that once we discuss cast and crew. Now, Tim,
if I can just, Corey, before we get there, I just want to piggyback on what you guys were saying. Carpenter did try to make this a PG movie, which is why there was no gore. He was hoping to get the PG rating. He still got the R, but that's why you're not seeing a lot of gore in this one.
And then they went and shot, I think they added some insert shots and stuff like that to kind of beef it up, like especially later when you see like the ghost's gooey face, like close-ups and stuff, they added those. Yeah. But I see how this could have been easily been PG, like just tone it down just a hair.
I would also just say I really, really do wish that I had seen this as a kid, because this would have been a really, really good horror movie for me to see as a kid. So, yeah, I saw The Thing as a kid, and it scared the shit out of me. And
not a good horror movie to see as a kid.
No, but I look back on that as a great memory. Like I can vividly picture where I was and what I was doing as I was running in and out of the room, watching this movie. But this would have been one that wasn't quite as scary, but still it would have given me all those like new scary feelings that I was looking for as a kid. So, yeah.
Oh, for sure. I will tell you, this was like a Halloween staple in my family, from like maybe 6 or 7 onward.
Yeah, you said you watched it every year. I was going to ask, was it around a specific time? So you're saying it was around Halloween?
Yeah, it was around Halloween. Looking back now, I'm like, oh, it would have been cool to watch it in April, with the date in the movie and whatnot. But now, like, it was a Halloween. Just that and Fright Night were the two, and Phantasm were like the ones that just heavy rotation, as a kid. And every year I would get terrified. And fortunately, we didn't have fog where I lived at the time. But then as I got older and lived in the Bay Area in California, and we would get fog there, and I would just like, we went to Bodega Bay once on a road trip, and I was just like, oh, this is too close to home in a good way.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned you didn't have fog where you were growing up, and I wonder if, because I didn't either, living in Maryland, I wonder if that was something where I was like, yeah, but it's just fog. Like, who cares? When I was a kid and kind of didn't really sort of gravitate towards it. Now I see it, and I'm like, oh, it's awesome. I love it. And now that I actually own the Shout Factory Blu-ray, I will say it will be higher in my rotation now. I honestly, once I finished watching it, I was like, I could watch this again right now. Like right now, I could watch it all the way through. It's such an easy movie to digest. But we'll get into all that nitty gritty once we get through the cast and crew. Now, Zach, I feel like this segment's going to dwindle because we've pretty much discussed almost everybody, but I want Tim to get a chance to comment on anybody he wants to comment on. So we'll go through the cast and crew, but guys and gals, it will be a lot of names that you've already heard.
And then some new ones that will become regulars as well.
Exactly.
I like that about Carpenter.
I do too. I actually always like that as well. I like directors that work with the same actors and actresses all the time. Yeah.
I mean, we'll start off the top with Adrienne Barbeau. I mean, Corey and I wax poetically about Adrienne and how much we love her. But Tim, what are some movies from Adrienne's filmography that you enjoy?
I mean, the most memorable for me is Escape from New York. She's just gorgeous and unforgettable in that movie. But yeah, I mean, I mostly know her from Carpenter's movies. And then, a very striking figure in Cannonball Run, which was always a favorite back in the day as well. So I thought it was interesting to go back to The Fog here because this is her first feature film, and I was really taken aback by how much of a superstar she was in this. Like, she was very, very well acted in this movie.
And as you all heard on our Someone's Watching Me episode, that's where John Carpenter and Adrienne Barbeau met. And then I think they got married right after that wrapped up. So this is their first time filming, like sort of as a couple and everything. I think you're right, Tim. I think he does a great job framing her, giving her great, shots and everything. But also him and Deborah Hill wrote a great character for her, in the Stevie Wayne character. She's strong. She's a strong character. She's not waiting for anybody to save her. She's trying to save other people, and standing her ground as she does it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I will say that, as much as we love Adrienne Barbeau and all her stuff in the 80s and the 70s as well, she did a movie called The Convent in 2000, which probably has flown under many people's radars. But if you're a fan of, teens getting demonically possessed and kind of bizarre special effects and over-the-top storyline, check out The Convent. She is a badass in that, and came out in 2000. So highly recommended, in my opinion.
Okay.
Cool.
That wasn't on my radar, but I'm always down for some nunsploitation. So
well, and I will say too, that's how Corey and I moving forward will kind of reinvent the wheel when it comes to the casting of talking about the cast. If it's somebody we've gone over, we might pull out a hidden gem from their catalog. But speaking of hidden gems or not hidden gems, Jamie Lee Curtis.
Woohoo, Jamie Lee Curtis. Well, you all know how much we love her on Trading Places, that episode. But I'll just throw out one of my favorite moments of her is True Lies. I thought she was great in True Lies. She was so much fun, and that's a great movie. It's one of my favorite Schwarzenegger films. And she's fantastic, and she looked great in that dancing scene.
Yep, same here, buddy. That's the first thing that comes to mind with Jamie Lee Curtis.
I mean, it's beyond me that and who even cares anymore, but the rumors that got started about her being hermaphrodite back in the day, and you guys can look that up if you're curious about it.
I remember that. Yeah, what the hell?
Yeah.
I mean, like, it's, from that role in True Lies and Trading Places and the John Travolta movie Perfect, where she's perfect in that, it's but this is one of her first roles as well. And she's starring alongside her mom.
Yeah.
Janet Leigh.
That was cool.
Janet Leigh, not to be confused with Tippi Hedren at times, because I'm like, is that Tippi Hedren from The Birds? What's going on here? But she was also in another Alfred Hitchcock movie, Psycho.
Of course. I mean, I don't really know much. I mean, it's so funny because you're like, I know the name. I know Psycho. I know it's Jamie Lee Curtis's mom. Then you look through her filmography I'm looking through it on IMDb. I see all Matt Houston's beautiful face showing up right there. So she was on an episode of Matt Houston. But it's funny because I don't think I've really ever seen her in anything else, even though she's Janet Leigh.
Yes, you have. You've seen The Manchurian Candidate, haven't you? You've seen Touch of Evil, haven't you?
Nope.
You've seen Psycho, haven't you?
Yes, that I've seen.
Finally. No, if you haven't seen Touch of Evil, Touch of Evil is amazing.
Who directed Touch of Evil?
Orson Welles.
I've seen it. It's the famous opening shot or something, the crane shot, right?
Yeah, and Charlton Heston.
Yep, I had to watch it in film school. I had to watch that and Double Indemnity like 3 times in film school. I'm like, I get it. You're a film noir movie. I understand. You're the best one. I get it.
I mean, I understand why people pop boners over that stuff. It's if these movies hadn't been made, we wouldn't have what we have today.
No, I'm only joshing. I understand. I respect it, but give me Star Wars.
It's a technical boner, though. It's not a pleasure boner. It's a technicality boner. It's like, you're
true.
You were so good at your craft that I'm getting a boner about it, but I didn't really enjoy it all that much. But it's cool.
True. Yeah. No, I understand. I have a few movies like that where I literally see people's eyes roll in the back of their head the minute I start, talking about the plot of this movie. But yeah, everyone has technical boners in their lives. And again, if there
technically
was,
have one right
That's
now.
very true.
I set you up and you hit it hard. And guys, let's be honest. If these movies were not made, we wouldn't have had the Fog remake.
Yeah. What?
Wait, what?
That's going to be a running
Wait,
joke.
what?
Wait.
But another old school actor who lived a few more years after this. As I like to say, he had a good run because he died at the age of 86. John
bad.
Houseman. John Houseman.
And for me, I recognize him. I'd say that probably Scrooged, maybe, also this and Rollerball. But the first thing that always pops into my mind is the conversation on Seinfeld about, he's got a real good John Houseman name, Berg. And they would kind of like sort of talk like John Houseman. So weirdly, the Seinfeld reference always pops up. You know what? And I'll roll it all back. Silver Spoons is probably where I know him most from.
Wow. You never saw The Paper Chase?
No.
You never saw 3 Days of the Condor?
No.
Oh, Tim, have you seen 3 Days of the Condor?
I haven't, but I know that that's one that I should. That's one of those technical boners that you'll get, right?
No. That movie is one of those, people talk about political thrillers from the 70s.
Oh.
That one is one you definitely should see. It is dark. It's got Robert Redford doing martial arts at one point.
Oh my!
So, in a Robert Redford way, probably the most physical you'll see Robert Redford get as an action star. It's a badass movie. Highly recommended.
Was that the movie that was sort of like a prequel to Spy Game?
Quite possibly. Yeah, I think maybe. There's some elements of no, not Sneakers. That would be more like, I guess you could. Yeah, maybe it is. But I will tell you, as a standalone movie, it is a great thriller. It is a very it's a cool thriller. When you're done watching it, it's one of those movies where people go, "Oh, have you seen this one? Have you seen that one?" You go, "Yeah, but have you seen 3 Days of the Condor?" And they go, "What? What's that?"
Yeah,
a kick-ass movie.
Cool.
You said Sneakers, and my mind just went to how much I freaking love Sneakers.
I mean, Sneakers is a flawless film and one of the best movies of the 90s, in my opinion.
I would stand right by you with that statement, my friend.
Yep. And the Fog remake is definitely not. So, okay, and then this is officially the first appearance of our boy Tommy Atkins.
Woo!
Playing Nick Castle. No relation to Nick Castle.
Exactly. Tim, where do you know Tom Atkins from?
I only know him from Escape from New York. That's it. But I was looking up, some of his credits, and he's been in some stuff, but I didn't really recognize him from a lot.
Have you seen Halloween 3 Season of the Witch?
I have seen Halloween 1. That is it. And I saw it for the first time last year. That was a Carpenter movie that kind of I never gravitated to. Halloween was like a series that my older brother really loved. And it was like this weird dynamic where he was so into it that I didn't want to get into it because he was already so into it. So I just kind of passed it by. But yeah, I really like Halloween, just seeing Halloween 1. And I'm kind of happy just settling there for right now. I really like the idea of that just being a standalone movie. I'm not ready to go too much further with that. I know I will, but I really just love the open-endedness that movie leaves you with. And I'm letting that breathe with me right now.
And as you heard on the Carpenter Factor of Halloween, I pretty much agree with you. Not the biggest fan of the rest of the series, but the good news is Halloween 3 Season of the Witch is completely standalone, has nothing to do with Michael Myers, and I adore that film. But it was one that I fell in love with as an adult. But you can completely watch that movie. I would honestly, at some point, like 100 years in the future, they should just drop the Halloween 3 moniker and just call it like Season of the Witch.
Right.
Because it literally has nothing to do at all with the rest of that franchise.
Yeah, I do have plans to watch that soon. And I think I'll watch 2 before that just to see how it progresses.
Okay.
if you want to see a sweet montage of Tom Atkins running with his family, go check out New Kids.
I do want to see that. I was really impressed with him in this movie.
He's great.
He's great. Yeah.
Yeah, he I mean, this is not one of his, well, yeah, it's one of his earliest roles as well, and he crushes it, sans mustache. It's one of the few movies you'll see him without a mustache. But I will say, I have one quick fun memory of Tom Atkins to share. I remember the first time I went to Universal Studios with my brother in the late 80s, early 90s. We were on the studio tour when you get to the part where you drive through the tunnel that looks like it's moving circular, like you're spinning or whatever. And as we're going through the tunnel, as we're approaching the tunnel and the driver's kind of hyping it up for us, Tom Atkins is standing off to the side of the tunnel saying, "Go back, go back. You're going to die in there."
Like, was it like a dummy or like an animatronic or?
Nope. It was really Tom Atkins.
He was just like there, just,
Yeah, maybe he must have been filming something on set and just decided to jump off and for me, that was like the perfect way to be introduced to, stardom, so to speak, or people that I thought were cool. I'm like, oh my God, that's Tom Atkins, and then I saw him at a Fangoria convention later, a decade later, and I told him that story. He's like, I remember being there. He goes, I don't know what I was filming something,
That's cool. That's awesome, dude. I was a similar story. I saw the very first taping of that 70s show. I was there for the pilot. I was in the crowd, so you can hear me laugh. And when we walked into the studio, Ashton Kutcher was nobody at the time. He was just outside smoking a cigarette right by the door. Like, we just walked two inches by him, and he kind of said hi to everybody. He seemed like a nice enough guy or whatever, but same thing. We just walked right past him, but he was nobody at the time, but then he blew up.
He's like, hey, that guy, Danny Masterson on the show? Stay away from that guy.
Stay away from
Scientologist.
My favorite Tom Atkins is Halloween 3, Season of the Witch. Tim, spoiler alert, he's kind of the exact same character. He bangs younger chicks and likes to drink some beers while he's driving. So, ain't nothing wrong with that back in 1980, I guess. It's different times, baby, different times.
That's how they did things back then.
That's how they did them. I will say this. I've already said it on the show. I've never seen Night of the Creeps. At this point, I'm just gonna wait until it pops up on us doing it on Podcast After Dark. If Zach doesn't bring it to the table, I'll do it at some point. Like, we have to do it at some point. It's a seminal film, but I've never seen it, and I know that he's a main character in it, right?
Yes, he
Zach?
is.
Okay.
Yeah, he is. I mean, he's I think he's top billed. But he's not the main guy, but he is one of the main people. He's
as much of the main as he is in here, right?
Yes, that's actually really accurate way to describe it. It's like a not ensemble, but somewhat of an ensemble.
Yeah.
And he's not the only regular in this. I'm gonna name one more kind of like to round out the top of the cast, and then we'll go into a few of the secondary characters that are more well known for Carpenter fans. Hal Holbrook is in this as well. If you don't know who Hal Holbrook is, the guy is a legendary actor. He died last year, unfortunately, rest in peace, at the age of 95. Had a great run. Speaking of Redford movies, one of his best ones was All the President's Men. So the guy is he's played everything. He's done cult horror films like Creepshow, and then he's done, legit dramas like All the President's Men.
Yeah. Yeah. He's been around for forever. I probably, weirdly enough, when I think about him, this is sort of what pops in my head, even though I've seen other movies that he's been in. I've seen a lot of movies that he's been in, but for me, maybe it's just because it's so recent. This is what pops up in my head.
I instantly recognized him. I'm like, oh, it's that guy. What do I know him from? And I still can't figure it out. I don't know what I know him from. I've just seen him in a bunch of things.
Because he's been in literally everything. I mean, the man, and then you'll hear his voice in car commercials or, I don't know, Smucker's Jam or something, the guy has done everything. And then he became, in his older age, it's that's when he mean, he's always been a very respected actor. That's why for me it was such a trip. I knew he was I was like, oh, that guy's in all the movies my parents watch, right? And then I see him in The Fog, and I'm like, oh, this is not a movie I would normally see him in, and it kind of tripped me out in a good way.
And they were talking about on the behind the scenes. They're like, oh, we got Hal Holbrook. He was Mark Twain, so did he play Mark Twain on Hal Holbrook Mark Twain Tonight?
Yes.
TV special. Okay, so he played Mark Twain there. But I also noticed he directed 4 episodes of Designing Women.
Wow.
He because he was married to, I'm pretty sure he was married to the lead actor on Designing Women. What's her name?
Yeah. The brunette, right? Dixie Carter?
Dixie Carter. I'm pretty sure he was married to Dixie Carter.
Okay. Guys and gals, I watched a lot of Designing Women back in the day because I spent a lot of time at my grandparents' house.
Same.
Who was your favorite of those 3?
Oh, Annie Potts. I was an Annie Potts guy because of Ghostbusters.
Have you ever seen Who's Harry Crumb?
Yeah. Not in forever, but yeah, I have seen it.
You might want to go back and watch that. Wink, wink.
Okay. Thank you.
She was a parent at my school, by the way. Very nice.
Shout
I
out
follow
to
her
John
on
Candy. Who's Harry Crumb?
John Candy and
Love
Tim
it.
Thomerson.
Love it. Love
Shawnee
John Candy.
Smith.
Are you going to call out George Buckflower?
Well, so really
I
quick,
want to.
I figured we'll go through the rest of the cast of returning actors to Carpenter films. So yes, George Buckflower. I knew if I wore this, I'd be the president. I'm the president. Wait till we get to Escape from New York. One of the favorite roles of his.
And
George
we loved
Buckflower.
him. And we loved him in Sorority Babes and the Slime Ball Bowl-rama.
Yep.
Can I talk about just some of the roles he went on to do?
Yeah,
Will you
please.
indulge me for a moment?
We'll indulge you
Just
for as long as you
go
want,
buck
buddy.
wild. Go buck wild.
Because he really found his groove at one point. And I'm just going to list off, the credits he had for several of his roles. He went on to play Flasher, Thirsty, Drunk Gambler, Beggar Again, Drunk, Red the Bum from Back to the Future and Back to the Future 2, Tramp, Drifter, Drunk Again, Redneck, Wino, Homeless Man, Drunken Man, Homeless Man Again, and Wino Again, among many other magnificent roles. But he found his groove. He found his niche.
But the funny thing is, then he goes on to be on Power Rangers Time Force, apparently. And he plays a bartender. So he's like, you know what? I'm going to clean my act up. I'm going to be on the other side of the counter.
I'm serving them. I'm not drinking them.
I'm serving him and I'm drinking him.
That's great. That is great.
And it's only fitting that Tim's on our show, being from Canada, because Bucky was in a Canadian horror flick called Blood Games from 1990. If you haven't seen this movie, highly recommend it. It's about an all-girls baseball team that kind of winds up in the South in this small town, and there's these rednecks that challenge them to a game of softball.
Oh my God.
Or baseball. And then it's like someone described it as A League of Their Own meets Deliverance.
Wow.
Wow.
That sounds
it's great.
amazing.
Just go watch the trailer. They just showed it here in LA, and I'm like, I got to get my hands on that movie because it's great. And God bless the guy for carving a niche out of playing these very could have been a one-note forgettable character, but we always remember his roles in these movies. We're like, I know that dude.
And he goes on to do a lot of stuff with John Carpenter. We talked about Escape from New York, but he also goes on to do They Live, and he's in Starman too.
One of his best roles, in my opinion, was in They Live. When we get to They Live, Tim, you've seen They Live, right?
I have, yeah.
Yeah, guaranteed. It's so good. So Nancy Keys, aka Nancy Loomis.
Hey, she survives this Carpenter movie.
Yeah, returning. She plays another kind of annoying character in Sandy. She comes back, and you kind of want to see her get killed at one point because she's annoying her boss so much, Janet Leigh. And then Charles Cyphers He's back, baby.
And
probably the one who's been in most of Carpenter's movies, I think.
Yeah, and at this point,
Up to
I
this
think
point.
it's 50-50. He's died twice and he's lived twice.
Yes, and poor guy, but he's got a great cable knit sweater, and he plays Dan O'Bannon. That's his character's name.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
There's actually some interesting character names in this. There's another one that I'll bring up that I brought up on another earlier Carpenter Factor movie.
Are you talking about Dr. Phibes?
I'm not talking about Dr. Phibes, which I love, by the way.
And I know who that is. Darwin Jostin.
What do we know him from and love him from the most?
Assault on Precinct 13. Tim, have you seen Assault on Precinct 13?
Nope, that's one that I've missed. Yeah.
It's a good one. Highly recommend that
Put that
one.
at the top of your list.
Yeah, looking forward to that.
And I will say, I don't know if Zach necessarily agrees with me, but I very much enjoyed that remake with Ethan Hawke.
Okay.
I actually never saw that one.
It was pretty violent.
Great cast.
Yeah,
though.
yeah, really good cast. But yeah, Tim, the guy who plays the doctor in this, he's the main character in Assault on Precinct 13.
Okay. Okay.
Interesting guy. Don't really see him in much else. He doesn't have like a lot of credits, but his presence, like when he's on screen, you're definitely like looking at him. You know.
Yep. Yeah, I was looking at him. Yeah, he had nice hair and a good nose.
He did.
A good shaped nose.
I was looking at him. I was just looking
I
at
was
him.
studying him, studying the shape of his face a lot.
And a couple notable, you don't see their actual bodies or whatever, but they are some of the ghosts in this movie. Tommy Lee Wallace plays one of the ghosts, and Tommy Lee Wallace he's a guy who's worked with Carpenter many times, but he's directed his own movies as well, directing Fright Night 2 and Aloha Summer, which is a favorite of mine, and Halloween 3, Season of the Witch.
Yeah, and Rob Bottin played Blake. For some of it, not all of it, and so did Charles Nicklin. But Rob Bottin, we know from The Thing. He did all the special makeup effects and everything in The Thing.
Yep.
Yes. I mean, Rob Bottin's a legend.
Yeah, he also
And Rob
did.
Bottin, go ahead.
You're a fan of The Howling, right? I remember that from one of your episodes. That's your favorite werewolf movie. Bottin did the transformation in that movie, and since we were touching on Star Wars before, he also worked on the cantina scene. He worked on the creatures in the cantina scene, and he played the tallest creature in A New Hope in the cantina.
Is it the one with the gas mask, but then the big bulbous head? You know,
I don't know. I always feel like the blue one with the thin neck is the tallest, but I don't know.
Oh, okay.
I don't know.
Interesting. Yeah, it's funny. I was watching something. Shit, I can't remember. I think it was for Podcast After Dark. But like Rob Bottin did like one thing for that movie, like a body cast or something. It's just interesting that Rob Bottin was just like sort of everywhere and like working on all these like things here and there. But I do think The Thing is his tour de force, right, Zach?
It is, and it makes sense. You saying that he was kind of everywhere. It makes sense that I don't want to say he had a nervous breakdown, but he definitely had to step away from the business because he just got so overwhelmed.
Well, and then I will probably elaborate further on the Thing episode, but I think he even wanted to be in front of the camera in the Thing, like one of the cast, and do all the special effects. And Carpenter was like, "Nah, dude, you're gonna have way too much on your plate for all that."
Yeah. He'd say, he would say, "Father, can I get paid today?" And so, and I was just gonna say one more quick thing about the like behind the scenes crew or names for that matter. Mrs. Colbritz, the name Colbritz, I mentioned this in the Someone's Watching Me episode. It's named after, I think, Richard Colbritz, who was an executive producer with Carpenter, did a lot of movies with Carpenter, like Christine and Someone to Watch Over Me and a few others. But yeah, I thought that, I'm like, wait, why does that name sound familiar to me? If you go back to that episode and listen to it, you'd be like, oh yeah, that's Mrs. Colbritz. Anyways,
that's awesome. And
there's your Mrs. Colbritz.
Tom Atkins' character, Nick Castle. Nick Castle is the guy who played Michael Myers in Halloween, right?
Yes.
correct.
So there is like John Carpenter. He does a lot of these like sort of like name games. He'll pull names from things that he knows from his past and make them his characters in his movies, which I think is neat.
Well, Nick Castle worked a lot with Carpenter, and we'll talk about him more when we get to Escape from New York. But he directed the last Starfighter, and he also directed Tap and The Boy Who Could Fly, which are all terrific films, in my opinion.
Yeah, The Last Starfighter is high on the rotation for my nephew to see next. He really wants to watch that one.
For sure.
But we do have a returning Dean Cundy, who worked on Halloween, and he's back for this. So they filmed this in anamorphic widescreen, which I think it was the first time that Carpenter used it. And I think he did a great job of doing it. But I was watching the behind-the-scenes documentary with Dean Cundy, and he was like, yeah, a lot of people don't like, to use this aspect ratio because it's hard to get close-ups with it. And I'm like, then I'm watching his close-ups, and I'm like, well, it doesn't look that hard, you know what I mean? And then he's like, well, it's not that hard. You just got to kind of figure out how to form the frame. But he did make an interesting note. He goes, it's closer to how we as a person view things. Like that aspect ratio is closer to how we see things naturally. And I was like, okay, that's interesting. I never really knew that, but I think this movie looks fantastic.
Yeah, I think it's framed really well. Like when you have just a single character in frame, a lot of the time it's Adrienne Barbeau's character of Stevie Wayne. She's normally, because she's alone, there's a lot of other characters in the movie who are coupled together, but she's alone. So that stands out in my mind. But Carpenter is so great at setting up rooms with props and making everything look so realistic and so lived in that none of it looks like a movie set. So I can see this really working for him because everything else on the screen looks very realistic. And if you're focusing in on the character and maybe the character is not as close up as you're used to, it's okay because of how well he's just placing his sets. His sets blow me away. Definitely one of the things that stuck out for me in this movie was just how beautiful everything was designed.
Yeah, totally. He's got a certain, like, this is where the factor for me really kicks in, because he's got Tommy Lee Wallace, who's his editor, who's done his editing for several of his movies. Dean Cundy, like you said, Corey, being the cinematographer. Dean Cundy spoke at the Aero Theater here in Santa Monica for a screening of Escape from New York one night, and talked extensively about his work with Carpenter and how you really see the relationship that these guys have, and when they work together, it's magic.
Yeah. Another thing they sort of mentioned was that since it was going to be an ensemble cast, and other than the Stevie Wayne stuff, there's going to be a lot of people in frame. That was another reason for them to choose to go with the anamorphic widescreen like this, to be able to put more people in the actual frame itself.
I know we're going to jump into it in just a second, but I do want to piggyback on what Tim was saying in regards to the set design and how fantastic it was. Like, yeah, literally everything. It's one of those movies where you're not going, or it's not one of those movies where you're going, oh, that's outdated Coke, or like the stomach pumper, the reference to the
stomach pounder, whatever the hell that is.
Stomach pounder.
Does anybody know what the hell that is?
Yeah.
You might need a stomach pumper after that.
You probably do. I wondered the same thing. I assumed it was some kind of sloppy Joe type of thing.
I figured, it was like a burger or something like that. It just lays in your belly. But yeah, just like, especially picking up watching this on the Blu-ray, because actually this is the first time I've watched this movie on a Blu-ray versus DVD or VHS. And I remember wearing out my VHS copy of this movie. Like, the Blu-ray, you get so many details that I never saw before. Like Stevie Wayne's photos of her husband. I never saw those. And I'm like, wait, oh yeah, okay. She did have a husband. I want to know the backstory on that. But again, that's the mystery of Carpenter and the idea of the one-off. you're supposed to come up with this stuff in your own mind.
Yeah.
You know, he's the master of story building for the audience, like to story build on their own.
And giving you little pieces to allow you to extrapolate if you want, go down rabbit holes if you want, but 9 times out of 10, he's not going to give you the answer.
No, and I love that.
Yeah.
I love that.
Me too.
Yeah, same.
Really quick, there was a guy in the convenience store, like the little market, in the beginning of the movie.
Yeah.
That guy is the doctor in Escape from New York that injects Snake Plissken's X-ray or the poison into Snake Plissken's neck.
Cool.
Oh,
So
cool.
I just
Nice.
spotted that. I'm like, I know who that guy. That's got to be the. Yeah, that's the guy from Escape from New York.
I loved how long they held on his character in this movie. It was
Yes.
too long. It didn't
was
need
too
to be
long.
that long, but it just worked. It was great.
As he drank
Yeah.
the orange juice and then put
Yeah.
it back.
And then he swept the floor for a while, down one hall,
Yeah.
then down another, and then like looked around. That was great.
It's a very quiet movie in that way.
so
like
yeah.
it takes its time.
So let's just jump into the
Yeah.
general discussion. As you all know by now, but for Tim, we're not going through this scene by scene or anything. So let's just all throw talking points out and discuss them if we want and move on. I'll start by saying at the beginning. 2 things that I loved. I love the title card, and I love how it's framed. Question, is the scenery in the foreground, that's a miniature, isn't it? Like that's a model, that's a set with the trees, and then I think they're shooting through it just for the fog, when the title card actually comes in. Can anyone corroborate that or not? Okay.
I'm gonna say yes, but I don't know for sure.
Yeah, I
Okay.
don't know.
Regardless, it's a beautiful shot, great title card, but I love the beginning of this movie. It's weird, especially as someone who, aside from like listening to all of our podcasts, I mostly listen to paranormal podcasts. So I listen to a lot of ghost stuff and a lot of weird shit. And they nailed that feeling of hauntedness at the beginning. I liked just all the little things happening, the subtle things like the payphones just going off, not so subtle things like all the car alarms going off at the same time. But no matter what, I loved that beginning, that first night at midnight when all the weird shit happened. Tim, as a first time, viewer, did you even know where this was going and what was coming at you?
I had no idea what to expect. I thought for the longest time when I heard the fog, I thought fog was killing people. And then through, just learning small pieces, I learned that there were people coming out of the fog. But it took me watching this movie to realize there's ghosts coming out of the fog. This is a ghost story. And I loved that idea of it. On our podcast, we've covered some Tales from the Crypt comic books from the 1950s, which were published by a comic book company called EC Comics. And as I was watching this very much felt like one of those Tales from the Crypt ghost stories. So afterwards, when I was doing a bit of research, for this episode, I found out that Carpenter was actually paying tribute to those EC Comics stories with this ghost story. So that's why it felt so ghosty and so familiar
awesome.
to me.
Yeah, and that's another thing I absolutely loved about this film is the way the ghosts, they're just black shapes. You see very little detail on them, sans maybe a couple close-ups near the end, but they're all just black shapes in the fog. Wow, absolutely just terrifyingly amazing. Zach, when you were a kid, did that just fucking freak you out, man? Like just shapes in the darkness like that?
Yeah, the shadows always got me as a kid, more so than I remember as a kid, like occasional close-up shots, you start to see subtle hints of what they look like at the end. It was or the dead body, with the blacked out eyes or whatever. That wasn't as freaky to me as the shapes were. Even the last scene where Stevie Wayne grabs the one pirate and you expose his algae covered face, with the worms and whatnot. That didn't bother me as much as just those shapes in the distance, or reaching out into the darkness of the fog. That shit just terrifies me. He kind of piggybacks a little bit on that with Prince of Darkness, with the arm reaching out at one point, that kind of creepiness. That's like another kind of, maybe it was his own homage, or he just decided to reuse it from the fog. But yeah, that stuff really freaked me out. I'm with you. The opening, the font is great. It's classic Carpenter right there. The music, the intro by Houseman, which is so terrifying. It's so perfect. I have the soundtrack on vinyl. And it's beautiful. It's classic synth score, and it's early Carpenter, so he was still kind of sowing his out, so to speak, on what worked and what didn't work. I'm more of a fan of like less is more when it comes to music. So he really nailed it in those kind of quiet moments. And that like that din 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 din, like that opening music that he plays, the theme, the fog theme, which is classic in my opinion. Yeah, there were so many things that I took note on in this opening sequence. One was his kind of pacing with the credits, and he's done this with many of his movies. The most glaring one would be Prince of Darkness, which we obviously broke down on Podcasting After Dark's regular feed, and we'll talk more about it when we get to it. But his pacing of credits is always very intentional and deliberate. Did you guys happen to time track when the credits ended?
I did, yeah. I'm weird like that, so I had to. I noticed that they were going on.
That's impressive.
For really, really long, and I liked it.
But
I liked the slow burn. Yeah, I tracked exactly when the last credit showed, which was directed by John Carpenter, and then I checked the time. Yeah.
And what was the time for you?
12 minutes, 12 seconds.
Yep.
That's cool. That's really cool.
And you notice too that he all the credits go very slowly, but then suddenly it's written by and directed by really quickly, because he had to get in there within the 12-minute frame. So I thought that was pretty cool. This is the first time I noticed that, by the way, because I'm like, there's something up with those credits. I better track the time on this. And I did. I'm like, holy shit. Yeah, that makes sense, because it was such a glaring like jump from written by, directed by, versus everything else was like slowly edited, want this thing, that thing.
I think he's saying
so
something
cool
with that too, though, because they mentioned in the movie a few times, like after midnight, this whole like it happens after midnight. And in the car, when the windows get smashed out with Nick and Jamie Lee Curtis, I forget her character name, but as after that window gets smashed out, on the radio they say it's 12 minutes after midnight. So there's the Carpenter's doing something with like just after midnight, and I don't know exactly what he was doing, but I did pick up on a few things, and I thought it was really cool that he even thought to insert those things into the movie. And I mean, we're all on the same page here, like just stuff like that, random stuff like that, even if it doesn't matter or if it doesn't mean anything, it has us here talking about it. It's like, oh, what did that mean? What was that all about? That's so cool that he did that. And it's just these little elements that make his movies so strange and provide that thing that we love about Carpenter. It's the Carpenter factor.
And technically, if you started watching the movie at midnight, the credits would end when technically all the craziness would start in your real life. So it almost creates this meta connection between the viewer and the actual characters in the movie. Even though, even if you're watching at 3 p.m, there's still this weird 12-minute connection there.
That's a great point.
Yeah. Yeah. And like you were saying earlier, Tim, with the name references and the kind of like the inside stuff, I feel like these are inside things that he does for his diehard audience. I think Joe Dante does the same thing right? In a lot of his movies, I feel like in The Howling or one of the movies.
We speculated on The Burbs because he very much put, directed by Joe Dante, square on Bruce Dern's chest in at the beginning of The Burbs, and you and I both speculated, like, why do you think he put it there? Like, that was very deliberate, you know. But again, we don't really know the answer, but it's fun. It gives you this little piece to kind of just chew on.
Well, it's that, and like Dan O'Bannon did he would name drop his favorite directors in, I think it was Return of the Living Dead, you know, giving people certain names or whatever. And I love that. I feel like this is something you just don't see anymore with these directors, where they're kind of referencing their buddies in a way.
Yeah.
Or they're referencing the things that they like. And so him doing I guarantee you when this movie came out in the theater, people were not tracking on their watch what time the credits ended. You know,
nope.
This is something that people didn't do probably on VHS. They probably did it when the DVD came out.
And it's probably intended to just be something that's subtle, you know, and subconscious, I should say.
I love that though.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
Me
it's such
too.
a great way to get, you know, welcome you into this world. Like, okay, for the next 90 minutes. And again, it's only 90 minutes. This movie is short.
Yeah.
Where you go on this ride, suddenly in the third act hits you, and you're like, when you know Stevie Wayne's son Andy, you know, is about to get killed by the ghosts, the movie's almost over at that point. You're like, oh shit, they're going to the church, and then that's it. It's gonna end.
Yeah.
It's really cool when you. Sorry, Corey, I cut you off there. It's really cool though when you can, like, learn something for yourself in a movie, where you pick up on something and you think, oh, I wonder if there's actually something to this. Like,
yeah,
I'm sure it happened with you too, Zach. But when I kind of caught on to the fact that something might be happening with these credits, and then I pause it right after, and it's 12:12, you realize you just found something. Like, you found like a hidden egg in the movie.
Totally.
And it adds to your experience because you connect with it even deeper on that level.
Well, and also too, like,
agreed.
So it was 6 conspirators originally, right? Wasn't it 6?
Yes.
Yeah.
And only 6 people die in the movie, including Hal Holbrook at the end, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, there's stuff going on there. There's stuff happening there. Tim, do you just throw out a random note or thought, you know, and we'll go from there, because I kind of threw these out at the beginning.
I'll throw a couple things out. I'll throw one thing out really quick, and that is one of my favorite things to watch at Halloween. I watch it every year. It is Garfield's Halloween Adventure. I never realized until now that whole episode is based on the fog. They are doing the fog. Garfield goes off to like a random house where there's an old man who stole treasure from pirates, and the pirates come back as spirits at 12 o'clock on this night. And I never realized it until now. So I loved that connection. I think that was so much fun for me.
That's cool. That's super cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And then I'd also say I'm a really big fan of movies that tell you straight off the bat that there are ghosts. Or this is an alien, because they show you the spaceship landing on Earth. Like, I like movies that aren't afraid just to put that out right at the beginning and forget about the mystery. This is what's happening. So I really liked the ghost story at the beginning around the campfire, which was basically laying out for you that this movie's going to be a return of these ghosts, you know, these people who had been treated incorrectly in the past, and they're coming back to haunt people. So I like that.
It sets the tone too. Like,
it did, yeah.
Because this movie itself feels like a campfire tale, because the kills aren't violent and gory, and I don't think you would find that at a campfire tale. You'd be telling the atmosphere. The atmosphere is what you're trying to invoke at a campfire tale, and I think this movie does that. And I think what you're saying, Tim, like at the beginning, really sets up the tone for this film.
Yeah, it sets the tone. It lets me know, like, I don't have to wonder what the fog is. I know what it is. They've told me what it is. They've told me what's going to happen. I can just kind of sit back and watch it take place. I don't have to worry about, is this fog supernatural? Are these people who just use the fog to come in their ship to like kill people? All of that is out of the way already because they've set it up. They've told me this is what's happening, and it allows me to sit back and enjoy it. A similar thing they do in the movie, like kind of just laying stuff out on the line, ahead of time for you, is that these ghosts only come at night. So that allows me, while I'm watching the movie and the daytime scenes, to not really be anxious about what's going to happen. It lets me connect with the characters more. I can like dig into them a little bit more and get a little bit closer to them because I'm not worried that one of them is just going to get randomly killed. Then when night starts to set in, that's when the anxiety can kind of, overtake you and you can be on edge. And I like that, like the disconnect between the two. I enjoyed that.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, that's a really good point. And I thought about that too, because looking back now on the 30 or 40th time I watched this and maybe more analytical going into it this time, realizing that the energy that's causing like the dead body to get up and almost slash Elizabeth, Jamie Lee Curtis's character, or the opening with the gas pump coming off or the glass breaking. That's all the energy that they can put out, but but they can't actually do anything physically to you, which is really cool. I love that. I meant to point this out earlier, and I'm kicking myself during the cast and crew. And I'm like, shit, man, I should have brought it up earlier because it's a really important point as far as the crew is concerned. Because I wrote this in my notes. Larry Franco is the assistant director of this movie.
I saw his name pop up. Yeah.
So Larry Franco, he did the Elvis movie with Carpenter, but moving forward, I won't list all of them, but he worked on 8 movies with Carpenter as an AD.
Okay.
Right. Or 9 now, I think, including Elvis. Some of my all-time favorites he's worked on. And then as a producer, 7 movies with Carpenter as a producer moving forward. And we'll list those when we get into them. But he also produced Tango and Cash, The Rocketeer, Batman Returns, Jumanji. Like, the guy is a legit dude. And I think being an assistant director, he has a good hand in the way this movie looks as well. And, Carpenter's movies, in my opinion, his strongest movies have been in the 80s. And for him to assemble this crew during this chunk of time when his best movies came out, it really says a lot about the Carpenter Factor in the sense that it's not just him, and Deborah Hill as well, working alongside of Carpenter. It's really this crew that he's assembled, cast included, that make magic happen. And I think he said it or Walter Hill said it, but they said, like, when you're comfortable, when you go on set and you don't have to like tiptoe around people or be introduced to a new set of people every time, it just makes the process that much more easier. And you can tell with these movies, like The Fog, the pacing, everything about it feels so comfortable. And I think that's why we can watch these movies over and over and over again, because they do feel comfortable. Everything about them, this movie in particular, top to bottom, has an effortlessness about it. The special effects don't feel like, I'm not nitpicking the special effects when the Dane, board from the ship is found, and it's at Stevie Wayne's, lighthouse, radio station, and the water kind of comes out of it at that one point, which is a great effect,
so
by
cool.
the way,
Really
from 1980.
Yeah.
It's brilliant, but I'm not nitpicking, and I'm like, well, how do they do that? It's more just like, oh, no, this is cool.
Yeah.
Like, I sometimes will nitpick, how do they do that scene? This is like, I don't care how they did it. It just looks good to me.
Yeah, and it's weird because it is a comforting movie because as it's got jump scares and everything, but it's so competently made and smooth and paced well that's why I was like, right when I was done it, I was like, I could watch this again right now. It's so much fun. One thing that I enjoyed, the kills aren't, that violent or anything like that, but I loved how like they framed it. So for example, Charles Cypher's death, I loved that he's kind of like halfway out the frame of the door. There's a lot of open frame to the left of him that's sort of outside, but I legit screamed, and this is like 1:00 in the afternoon, bright outside. I've seen this movie like 3 times already, but I still audibly screamed when the hand comes sort of from screen right, because I was not expecting that. I was expecting the hand to come from screen left where the big vacancy was. Also, it sort of comes from inside. That's what I love that too. But that is such a great jump scare and such a great use of your framing. And I think that's an example of how confidently and competently this movie is made. Tim, do you know what scene I'm talking about, right? When the weatherman gets it?
I do, yeah. Yeah, I think the best jump scene for me was the Father Malone, the Hal Holbrook scene where he does the jump scare, where he just comes out of the fucking pitch black, out of the dark.
Hi.
Yeah. I thought that was a hilarious scene, actually. Like, I really enjoyed that scene for a bit of comedy, because it's just like a really weird scene. You've got the characters of Kathy and Sandy. They're going to talk to Father Malone about like renovating the church for him. They're going to fix it up and make it better. And they're like, well, okay, let's just go in and see where this guy is. They go in. He comes out of, like I said, the dark. He scares the shit out of them. And then he's like, hey, you guys want to check out what I found? My grandfather's journal? Hey, listen to this. Sit down and listen to me read you this terrifying journal. And I just felt like, dude, Father Malone, read the room, man. Like, they're not there to listen to you reading out of this fucking terrifying journal that you found in the wall. I just thought that whole scene for some reason was all very funny to me. I enjoyed its placement in the movie.
I just love you telling Father Malone to read the room.
I love Father Malone. He's such a great character. I love in movies where you have a supernatural force and you balance it with a holy man. I think that's a really like great thing to do in a movie for balance. And they did that in this movie. However, Father Malone, he just realizes like very early on, they're all doomed. He's like, this is all futile. It's useless. We're done for. And that's kind of his arc. It's not this arc of like, I can help you fight the supernatural. It's that the supernatural is too much for us. We're goners.
There's no hope.
Probably that explains his drinking problem that he has throughout the whole movie. And I love when Nick takes his bottle and smashes it, at the end of the movie, like, give me this thing. Give me this, wake up, man. The idea that this father character is such a pivotal role, and then a few years later he's doing it again with Prince of Darkness and Donald Pleasance, which is really cool, with a pivotal with a pivotal father character again a few years later. So I just love that. But I will say jump scares aplenty, and this may be I know he started obviously with Halloween, but this is probably more jump scares than Halloween overall.
More jump scare heavy. Yeah.
Agreed.
And it's like one jump scare after another. It really is like
but they're good jump scares. They're like, it's not a jump scare that wasn't deserved. Like it's like you're waiting for it. It's not a jump scare of a cat jumping out of a cabinet or something. It's the actual ghosts doing it, and that's the kind of jump scare that I ultimately want. I want one that's actually set up and deserved, and I am fine with that kind of a jump scare. The jump scares that I hate is when everything's normal and then all of a sudden like something screams or something. You're like, what the? Yeah, it's the cheap ones that I don't like.
I think, and I'm almost 100% certain that, in my opinion, Carpenter is my favorite jump scare director. Like, his jump scares make sense and they're meaningful.
and
I'd
they're
agree.
enjoyable. They're enjoyable because think about this: The Fog, jump scares; The Thing, jump scares; Escape from New York, jump scares. We'll get into more, but I'm fairly certain there's even more jump scares in his other movies as well. And so he's the master of jump scares, in my opinion. And so everybody else just imitates him. Yeah. And either they do it acceptably well, or it is, I agree with you, Corey, it's that stupid, like, makes you scream, but it comes out of nowhere, cliche stuff. But it was not a cliche until John Carpenter started doing it.
Yeah.
Like, he created the cliche. Everybody moving forward did it, and they're like, oh, this has been done before. But I don't know who did it. John Carpenter's the one who did it. Now, I don't think he gets enough appreciation for that.
I agree. I'm with you there. Now, one thing I do want to talk about is, for 1980, how well the effects were for The Fog. So, two things. One, when you see the sort of the wide shots, when it's like when she's looking out over the bay and everything, when it like goes around the house, what they did was it's a composite shot, obviously, but the nice thing is when they created the fog for the composite, they had it go around like a box or something that was like sort of the same shape as the house, so they could actually get that shape and kind of do it right. So it actually comes, and I think it looks fantastic. And then the other side of that is they had to film some stuff in reverse, like when Adrienne Barbeau's on the roof of the thing and everything. When they filmed in reverse, they would have to you have to remember to emote your emotion in reverse, but you also couldn't blink, because blinking in reverse, you can see it, like it'll look weird. So they couldn't blink at all whenever they did their reverse shots. But
weird.
Not gonna lie to you, I've got a pretty good eye for special effects. I never once picked up on a reverse shot, like with an actor that I could see or something in it, like I never was like, oh, that was a reverse shot. I think just craftsmanship, just through the roof, the craftsmanship in this film. Tim, thoughts on just how the fog itself was handled? And I'm not talking about the ghosts in it, but the fog itself.
Yep, I got you. It was fucking gorgeous. It was gorgeous. I think only one time did I notice like a reverse fog, like the fog, like maybe coming out of, a box backwards. That was the only thing. But the fog was so beautiful. There's the scenes that really stick out for me are the ones where it's coming to the shore, and there's that camera. They've got the camera placed on kind of like the beach line, and they show you that shot many times in the movie. And the fog is rolling in a few times. But there's one time where the fog rolling in is green, the beach is purple, and the sky in the background is orange. And it was just beautiful. But I love that the fog itself, this is what I got out of it. The fog looked like a spirit or a soul. Like, it didn't just look like fog. It looked like it was alive. Like it had a presence to it, which I think it did, and was really interesting in the movie, because you've got the fog that precedes the ghosts themselves, but the fog it's, in my opinion, it's separate from them. Like, it does different things than what they do. It just kind of rolls in, and it can affect your clocks, or it can move chairs, or it can screw different things up. And that's just the proceeding of the ghosts coming to kill you. So I found, now this is just, I watched it twice, but I found there was like a duality to the fog. It wasn't just this one entity. It was more than that. So I loved the way it looked. I thought they did a great job. And I read that they even got lucky with some actual fog that was happening that they were able to include in the movie.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's beautiful. I mean, this movie, there was never anything before it like this. And so he created, and nothing ever since. Like, I'm not talking about the remake. I can't include that on anything because it's a piece of crap. But this is so wonderfully done. The special effects are so impressive. It's essentially an indie film. You know, Avco Embassy was a indie
production company.
By the way, Tim, how much do you love that Avco Embassy title card thingy? I fucking love it.
It was beautiful. That was the first time I've seen that version of it.
Zach, did we see that on Shivers? We saw it on some. Okay.
Yeah. In Avco, there used to be an Avco Embassy theater,
right? Yeah.
On Wilshire in Los Angeles, which is so cool.
That's awesome.
Beverly Hills, I think, and now it's like an iPic or something like that. But anyways, I remember as a when I first moved down to LA and I drive by that theater, I'm like, Avco Embassy, and the fog is what I always thought of immediately, because I had the VHS tape of this movie and I would watch it over and over. And like I said, I wore it out. I thought I wore it out because the foghorn always used to make me think that there was something wrong with my tape.
Oh, yeah.
Because it's playing throughout. And at times it's a little distracting. I'm not going to lie. At times I'm like, okay, I don't need to hear this anymore, but it's all intentional. So I appreciate that he's keeping it consistent. But I did think at times, I'm like, I don't remember hearing it when I was younger, maybe watching it on TV, the TV version. And I'm like, is there something wrong with my VHS tape? So I would take it back to Suncoast Video and like switch it out. There's a flaw in the tape, and like, okay. And then I watch it again. I'm like, no, that's part of the movie. Oh crap. Okay, fine. I'll take the foghorn. I wanted to so badly go to this location in Bodega Bay. I'm like, we got to find that lighthouse, and I think that guy Horror's Hollow Grounds.
Yeah, it's on here. They have it on the Blu-ray, and I think you and I watched it way back in the day when we watched this for the first time. Yeah,
we sure did. There's so many things that you just pick up on that are so cool, like the radio bumpers that Stevie Wayne is listening to as she's on her way to the station. It's just so cool that in any other setting it might be annoying as hell, but it's just so, because you're listening to the same thing over and over, but you're in her mind. How brilliant is that? Yeah, because she's listening. It's so special. Again, it's like lightning in a bottle with this movie that you cannot be replicated. And I love that he didn't make a sequel. They could have ended it with Blake leaving, and with the gold, and then that was it, and Hal Holbrook living, and they could have made a sequel where he comes back and now they're trying to protect that one of the sixth because he's such a good guy, clean up his act. Now he's working with lepers in the community, but they didn't. They killed him off at the end, which is great. And like, nope, the movie's over. They got what they needed. They're not bad guys. They took revenge on the shit that was done to them.
Exactly. Yeah, agreed. Yeah. And the last note I have for just the movie itself versus, when we talk about the Carpenter Factor, which we already did discuss some stuff, but we'll still condense it all. But real quick, the kills. I love how the ghosts just stab you to death. Especially the guy in the eyes. That was my favorite one, the captain of that boat, where he just fucking stabbed the shit out of him. But I feel like, in all these post-90s and 2000s ghost movies, like let's just say, for example, Mirrors with Kiefer Sutherland, like they're gonna, like, it rips your jaw off, it rips your head off, like some sort of gory thing, some sort of elaborate thing that the ghost does. Here they just stab you with their swords and their knives, and they like gang stab you, like you fall to the ground, and they hack you to pieces until you're dead, but you don't.
Mrs. Colbert's got.
She got got. But I love the fact that you don't see it. It's not bloody. It's not gory, and it's got guys and gals, directors out there. Sometimes just let the audience fill in the blanks. It's always going to be scarier than anything you can possibly show them. But I love those kills. Like I said, especially the guy got it in the eyes. I thought that was awesome. But Tim, what were your thoughts on just like the way the ghost killed, or did you want anything more, or did you like what they did with it?
No, I thought it was great. I thought that them knocking at the door was really cool. I don't know why they do it, but it was a lot of fun and it really worked. Yeah, I guess like looking back on it, maybe you could have made the kills more gory. There was no blood, which seemed a bit odd. especially having seen, like The Thing and not having seen this, I'd expect more gore. But yeah, as mentioned earlier, I understand that he was trying to go for PG, so I don't have a problem with it. I think it's totally fine. Yeah,
would you have wanted to see more gore, do you think? Or, you know what I mean? Like, do you like gore in horror movies?
Yeah, if I had to choose, if there were 2 cuts, I'd watch the one with more gore in this movie. Okay. I'd show a kid the one, without the gore, but for me, myself, I'd want to see a bit of blood, a bit of gore. I think that would be cool. But it didn't deter from the movie for me. Everything was fine. I actually didn't even really notice it until afterwards when I was, reading up on The Fog and read that he left all the gore out. That says something for you that I didn't even notice it the first time I watched. So in that way, the kills were good enough for me because, I didn't notice. But I loved the ghosts. I loved that. Half of the time they were jump scares, and half of the time they were just kind of there, and then they would kill you, and you knew it was going to happen. So they were
kind of like a force of nature. Like, they're always going to come for you if you're in the fog. They won't stop.
Yeah. It's almost like they had a bit of personality too. Like, 'cause if they just kill in one single way, I don't get personality out of them. But if they kill in different ways, that lends a bit of personality to them, and I like that.
Yeah, there's a artist. I see his work on Instagram all the time. I think it's like iBrav TV or something.
Oh yeah.
And he did like a Scooby-Doo kind of mashup of the Fog characters. I think they got turned into like Tiny Toons or McFarlane Toons or whatever, those little horror figures of Captain Blake and like what he looks like outside of the fog. It's cool. I prefer the subtlety of not knowing what they necessarily look like in the fog.
Because Blake's the only one you really get to see actually like a look on his face, like how he looks essentially.
Right. Yeah, and I like that the one gore, quote unquote, gore shot or gross shot, more gross than gore, of the one pirate whose face was green. It makes sense that it was green because it's covered in algae.
Yeah.
I love that. I love that the pirates are dripping water. When the one buddy on the ship in the beginning of the movie can hear the pirates right behind him, and he's like, "Did you get wet out there?" There's so many like little subtle things that worked, and on that subtle tip, I would have actually preferred less sound effects when they did the hacking. Like at the end, it made me laugh more than it made me shocked when the Father Malone gets his head cut off, because it's such someone ripping an apple in half. Yeah. And it wouldn't be that sound, I get it. I get it. It's fine. I'm not like dissing it. It's more just like it made me kind of laugh more than it made me go, oh, I think when I was a kid, I was more shocked. Now I look back and I'm like, yeah, the sound effects were a little over the top. Someone stepping on crushed grapes or whatever in the sound room.
Some hardcore Foley going on.
Right. But my one intense moment for me that stood out was the scene where Elizabeth and Nick rescue Andy, and they get in the truck and they get stuck in the mud.
Oh yeah.
And then Nick and Elizabeth turn and look at each other. It's very intentional because the camera just stays on them. And it's such a great moment because they both look at each other like, oh shit, we're going to die. And I rewound it today just to watch it again because it's so cool. The acting on their parts is just brilliant. And again, the casualness of the performances in this movie are really good. With John Carpenter's acting is a little left to be desired, but that's not a surprise.
So Tim, did you see John Carpenter in the film?
I did, yeah.
And do you want to call out where he is?
Yeah, he's Father Malone's assistant right at the beginning. He wants to get paid.
Bennett,
Father Malone says, "How about instead of paying you, you just come in a couple hours later tomorrow?" And that seemed to be okay. Yeah, very cool.
And it seems how the last movie that we talked about that he directed was Elvis, and his little scene in that movie was real quick and short. He pumped himself up a little bit for this one. He's like, I'm gonna give myself something here.
Yeah, he had a couple.
And you know
did,
what?
and then
He didn't do it. He didn't do a bad job either.
No,
It wasn't terrible.
It wasn't terrible.
Bad. Did you guys notice the other shout out for Carpenter's side project?
no.
When Stevie Wayne announces the Coupe de Villes are, coming up next, it's the Coupe de Villes. That's John Carpenter's side band.
Oh, was that him?
no.
So he was in a band. I mean, we all know he does his music and everything, but he was in a band too.
He was in a band. So the Big Trouble in Little China soundtrack, the theme is done by the Coupe de Villes. And so if you go on,
Right.
there's a pretty hilarious music video on YouTube. You can check out the Coupe de Villes performing. That was the name of his band that he was in.
Nice.
Good times.
I don't have any other notes other than, hey, it's nice that 100-year-old ghosts know how to cut the phone lines. But
I think the fog cut the phone lines.
Yeah, the fog was like, I got this, don't worry. But other than that, as far as like the main movie itself goes, I don't really have any more notes. Tim, is there anything you want to talk about before we quickly move on to the Carpenter Factor?
No, I'm good. Let's go into the Carpenter Factor.
Okay, Zach, you got anything, buddy?
Yeah, I just want to lastly shout out the Edgar Allan Poe quote in the beginning.
Yeah.
Is all that we see or seem but a dream within a dream.
And it's kind of like what Stevie is talking about at the end, where she's like, if we all wake up tomorrow that this was a dream, like that would be great, or this is a nightmare, that'd be great. But if we don't, then we got to be prepared for them to come back, which I found interesting because technically she wasn't there. She doesn't know what the entire story is because she wasn't at the church at the end. So they're probably not going to come back, but I like the fact that she doesn't personally know herself because she had her own battle that she had to fight,
She doesn't know if her son's even alive.
At that point in time, at that moment, no, she doesn't.
And I was thinking about that too, the idea that she's screaming, for her son. And whoever's listening to this radio broadcast that doesn't live in the area is probably like, "Oh, this is that
Find
War
your
of the
son.
Worlds
I can just
thing."
picture one guy like just, oh my God, what's happening? That's
Yeah,
just like
or Tom
right in the
Atkins.
next town over.
Yeah, or somebody like yelling, "Stop it! Stop it!" from Halloween 3.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, and I think in many ways that quote applies to a lot of Carpenter movies in general. A lot of his movies, they live as like you sleep, right? For the aliens to take over. Prince of Darkness is, when you sleep, you see the reality of what's coming through.
You get the message. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's this kind of reoccurring theme of like, is reality a dream within a dream? And I think that's very telling. I feel like as we're moving into what is the Carpenter Factor with this movie, he's really starting to find his pocket as to who he is as a filmmaker.
Yeah.
After several movies that were basically just hire for cash. Like maybe he just wanted to get the money so he can make his own stuff.
Yeah. So the interesting thing is, as we discussed on Someone's Watching Me and Elvis, they didn't quite feel like Carpenter films, but at the same time, they also don't quite feel like proper entries in his filmography. Like you said, they kind of more felt like, movies for cash, something he just did. Although we discussed extensively, they were good for his career as a whole.
Yeah.
But Tim, just ballpark, does this feel like a Carpenter movie to you? This is pretty much your first time watch, but you are experienced with Carpenter, so the music. It's all these little pieces that come together, and we can discuss each little piece individually. But as a whole, Tim, did this feel like a Carpenter movie to you?
I just wanted to say I agree with Zach about that quote. When I read it before the movie, I didn't really understand it, and then at the end, I also took that as like, this is a Carpenter Factor. This is something he's putting into his movies. The Thing very much ends up feeling like a dream. In the Mouth of Madness very much ends up feeling like a dream. Like this is, I feel like he like digs into something here and he's like, I'm going to go for this in my movies. So I think that is a Carpenter Factor, that quote itself. But For me, for the Carpenter Factor, I think that's a really interesting question because, in a way, to know the Carpenter Factor, you'd almost have to watch all his movies to really understand what the Carpenter Factor truly is. So I'm really curious how that's going to turn out for you guys once you see everything, how you actually define the Carpenter Factor. But the Carpenter Factor for me, from the movies that I've seen of his and that I love, is basically, does it feel weird? And not in a bad way, but in a good way. And do I get immersed in the world? Like, does it just pull me in? Do I feel like I'm just in there and it's like a living thing? Is this movie unlike any other movie that I've seen before? Is it something very unique? And
good point. Uniqueness is something that Zach and I haven't really been tracking, but that's actually a very, very good point. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then the final thing I would put in there is, did I have fun? And that to me is the Carpenter Factor. And for this movie, I would say, of course, 100%, this movie just epitomized the Carpenter Factor for me.
Yeah, I'd say the Carpenter Factor is very strong in this film. For me, some of the takeaways were obviously the music. I heard shades of Halloween, and that's fine. But then also it deviates from that, and like in the climax, I wish I'd written it down. I don't have I'm not a music guy, but I liked how he was doing something in that climax that I was just really enjoying, and it was very different from Halloween. So if earlier in the movie some of the music sounded similar to Halloween, I feel like it diverged by the end of it, and I loved it. And even when it does sound similar to Halloween, it's like saying that Tool songs sound the same. It's going to happen. You know what I mean? Like, we all know that. Motley Crue songs. It's Motley Crue. It's like, yes, it's all going to be the same, but it's also different too. Zach, much more and can speak much stronger on the musical aspect of it.
Well, I was just going to say that, someone like Hans Zimmer, people know it's Hans Zimmer when they hear his score. Doesn't mean every soundtrack he does sounds the same, but there are elements that are the same, right? And that's with Carpenter. I agree with you. There's moments in this that are very similar to Halloween. However, he's much more coming into his own.
Yeah. I feel like this. I feel like the score is more confident than Halloween's score is.
Yes, and it's also it's like has more of a direction, right? Versus, I'm not saying Halloween didn't, but what I'm saying is this soundtrack tells more of a story, right? Versus in Halloween, it's like the notes, there's like one note and just kind of variations on that one note. And this one has that, it's a journey.
And in Halloween, the notes kind of like tell you when the killer's there or kind of accentuate the jump scares. Here, the score is kind of the score. It doesn't sort of meld into the jump scareness. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally.
Totally. And another thing for me personally that I kind of picked up on as we discussed on Halloween, there's this weird emptiness, this loneliness to Carpenter movies sometimes where even though you're living in a suburban town, for some reason there's like no one walking around. And you could say, oh, well, that's maybe, because you can cut down on cost and everything. Sure. Yeah. But it still adds to the dreamlike quality of the Carpenter movies. And here, I mean, honestly, we only see two crowd scenes. One at the unveiling of the statue or whatever in Town Square, and even then, it's only like 50 people. And then we're at the bar, and even at the bar, there's only 5. Everywhere else, there's just, I mean, it feels alive and populated, but it still feels lonely and isolated. And for me, that's a big time Carpenter Factor.
We mentioned earlier that this movie felt comforting in a way. And I think that's part of the comfort level. Just that emptiness, like that there's not a lot of stuff going on. The movie allowing itself to breathe, where we're able just to sit back and breathe ourselves. So I think that's an interesting comparison, with just how little there is going on, to the fact that we felt comforted within the movie.
Within a horror movie,
within a horror movie, yeah,
which is interesting.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and so a lot of those. So for me, and I'll agree with Tim. For me, this feels very much like a Carpenter film. I think it has the Carpenter factor much more than Elvis and Someone's Watching Me, obviously. But this feels like the perfect, spiritual successor to Halloween, in my opinion. Zach?
Yeah, I agree. More so than Halloween, I think. Halloween being a quote unquote slasher movie and having its own genre. I think that's another piece of this, like, to kind of go off of what Tim said, the uniqueness. If you can't necessarily define the genre that it's a part of right off the bat, you can call The Fog a horror film, but it's not but what's the subgenre of it? Ghost story? Yeah, I guess you could say ghost story, but it's more than a ghost story, in my opinion. Like, there's like a metaphysicalness about it. And then it's an elemental ghost story with nature being a part of it, which is, again, unique. Doesn't fit a mold, it doesn't fit a perfect mold, is what I'm saying. And that's why it's quintessential Carpenter. It definitely fits the Carpenter factor. It clicks all the boxes. And like I said, it's not flawless. Like, there's moments where I'm like, yeah, that didn't work that much for me. Which may factor into my overall score that we give these movies, but I still love it so much. And I think I do love it for the fact that he toned it. If he had intended to make this movie he intended to make this movie to get a PG, right? Toning down certain elements, didn't get that. So it still rolled out as an R. Would he have gone back and added those other things to just make it a true R film? Would that have changed it? I think it would have. I think I like the fact that it's like The Changeling in a way. Like, you can go, this movie is scary as shit, and that's what makes it an R. Like, the tone is what gives it an R rating.
Yeah.
And when the tone of something impacts the audience, that speaks more to me than the gore factor or the swearing or the nudity. Like, the tone, that tone is everything.
And
right?
this movie is all tone and atmosphere.
Think about that.
It's a masterclass in atmosphere.
But it's hitting me now, this idea that tone matters.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right? It's not the words. It's how you say it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the action and like everything about that. So yeah, no, I'm on board with this film being towards the top of the list for me.
Yeah, so as you know, on the Carpenter Factor, we give it a rating. We don't normally do that, but we figured, by the end of this, maybe the numbers will tell us something. We're not sure what yet, but we'll figure it out. I'll just kind of really quick say, Zach, Dark Star you gave 5.5, Assault on Precinct 13 8.5, Halloween 8.5. Someone's Watching Me a 1, and Elvis a 4. Tim, I love you, buddy. That's why I didn't have you on Elvis or Someone's Watching Me.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome,
Corey.
Tim.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate that.
Zach, give us your rating and give us your final thoughts on the movie.
I'm giving it an 8.5 as well. It's just not at that perfect point for me, but it is a movie I can watch over and over and over and over and over again. And I have, and I will continue to. It's not a flawless film, but it's pretty damn close overall. So that's my final thoughts.
Tim, what out of 1 to 10, 0.5 are okay, and just comparing it to other Carpenter films that you've seen, and comparing it as a whole,
I hate to do this, Corey, but I do want to jump back to the Carpenter Factor for a second.
Sure.
Because I have one more thing I want to say about it. And then I'll get into my rating.
Friend. Yeah.
Then I'll get into my rating. Now, this is just me coming off of watching Halloween. I've seen it one time. I've seen The Fog twice. Halloween came out in 78. The Fog came out in 80. Halloween 2 doesn't come out till 81. And we know that Carpenter wasn't planning on doing a sequel for Halloween. So just something I picked up on in this movie, which I love and I think is a Carpenter factor, is that if you look at the character of Elizabeth,
Jamie Lee Curtis.
Jamie Lee Curtis, she's in Halloween. She's in this movie. She makes a comment. She says, "Things seem to happen to me. I'm bad luck." In the context of Carpenter movies, I like to believe that it could be possible that that is the same character in Halloween and The Fog. And he leaves it open. It's up to us to decide. She could just be hitchhiking across the country here because of what happened. And I love that about these movies. And that is Carpenter factor for me.
Dude, before you give your rating, I noticed that this viewing as well, and my thought was I wasn't like making it sort of like, oh, it's Laurie Strode sort of running. To me it was more of like a meta sort of thing, like addressing the fact that yes, I'm Jamie Lee Curtis. I play, because I've already done Prom Night at this point as well. I believe Prom Night was before this, and Terror Train and stuff like that. And it's like I feel like it's almost her metally saying I'm bad luck, but I noticed that line of dialogue as well, dude.
And I want to add one little thing onto that. My thinking was it was a slight homage to Hitchcock's The Birds, because I think The Birds also takes place in Bodega Bay, and I think Tippi Hedren's character Melanie, which is named after her daughter, by the way, which is really, there's a whole backstory there that everybody should look into. It's very creepy. Anyways, she says like I'm bad luck, or people think she's the one that brought the pain to the town. So there you go.
Okay, so my rating for this movie, and what I'm going to go off of here, is that I've got The Thing and Big Trouble in Little China as 10 out of 10s as movies for myself. So I'm going to base The Fog on that rating. And I'm going to give it a solid 8 out of 10. I think it's a great movie. I liked the cast a lot, but I think a stronger cast would have made a bigger impact in this movie. And that's not Carpenter's fault. Like, he's working with what he can work with here. But if he had stronger actors and actresses, I think they might have been able to pull a little bit more out of certain characters. Not all. I think some of the characters were perfect. I think the screenplay could have been just a little bit tighter. There's just a few things that I think I feel like if John Carpenter had a second pass at the movie, he could have tightened a few things up and made it just a little bit better. But really great movie, 8 out of 10 for me.
Nice. Solid. I probably agree with you on the ratings of the other two movies, and I agree with you on the rating for this. I'm giving this one a solid 8 out of 10. I think it's an amazing film. I like I said to Zach earlier, it's a movie that every time I watch it, I like it a little bit more, and I expect it to be heavier in my rotation moving forward. I mean, an 8 out of 10. I freaking love this film. I love its pacing. I love just the way it's shot, and I love the ghosts. Like, I love the horror element of it. I think maybe things that I would want more. I wish we saw more people fighting for their lives, during that like final climactic moments. Just, I want to see more people around town fighting for their lives. But that doesn't detract from it. Like, none of its minor shortcomings detract from it. I think The Fog is a unique film. Like Zach said, it's an exceptionally unique film. Even though it is a ghost story, it's a ghost story unlike you've seen before. And if this is something you've never seen, I mean, my God, go out and watch it right now, because
what is wrong with you?
What is wrong with you?
That was me 2 days ago. That was me.
Yeah. And hey, you know
well,
what, Tim?
young buck.
I appreciate you watching it twice for the show, by the way. I do
if anybody
that.
out there is like me and hasn't seen this, just do it already. Just do it.
Just do it.
Just do it.
Do it already.
And isn't it interesting too about Carpenter? Because I don't know if you've seen documentaries about him, but all he ever talks about is all the Westerns he loved as a kid. Always Westerns. But he's a horror guy. You know what I'm saying? Like, like his mind is made for horror. It's made for horror. It's made for supernatural.
But see, that's what I think is great about it because, well, first off, Deborah Hill, she was admittedly on the documentary for this. She grew up watching horror. I think she might have been his more closer connection to horror, but moving forward, even when they kind of don't work as closely together, he's still great for it. I think it kind of goes back to the idea that like great leaders are people who don't want to be leaders. Like they're not trying to go for the power. He's a great horror filmmaker because his background isn't necessarily horror. And I think that's why he makes such unique horror films.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And God bless Deborah Hill.
Yes, and not horror films too, because just so you all know, next month we have Escape from New York. Then after that we have The Thing. Then we have Christine, Starman. But then we have Big Trouble in Little China, Prince of Darkness, They Live. We have we're gonna be on a tear for a bit, and then we're gonna hit Memoirs of an Invisible Man, which I've never seen. We're gonna get never seen that. We're gonna get Body Bags, which I've never seen. We're gonna get Mouth of Madness, which I've never seen. I've never seen the third of the Apocalypse trilogy, which is The Thing, Prince of Darkness, and Mouth of Madness. And Tim's seen Mouth of Madness, he said. Zach, we all know Zach's seen it, but I haven't. So I'm not going to watch it until we get closer to that point.
I've got something special for In the Mouth of Madness for you, too. So, over on $2 Late Fees Patreon, we do a Why Does Zach Own This segment. I own a piece of In the Mouth of Madness memorabilia that will blow your mind.
Cool.
Well, speaking of Patreon, Tim, Talking Back, has a Patreon. What do you guys cover over there on the Patreon page?
Our Patreon, we're just given some bonus episodes. We've got a monthly wrap-up, and then we do a monthly bonus episode. And we're always trying to give back as much as we can. So if we can find time in the month to do more than one bonus episode, we're throwing up as much content as we can. So yeah, if you want to support our show, please check us out on patreon.com/talkingbackpodcast. All the support helps. It takes time and it costs money to run a podcast. So we appreciate anybody who wants to toss a couple bucks our way. And in return, we toss you a couple exclusive episodes that you can't get anywhere else. So check it out.
And I will, of course, have all the links to Talking Back in the show notes, social media, websites, Patreon, all that kind of stuff. So please click on any of those and go support a great show, a fantastic show. I love Talking Back, and I also love $2 Late Fee. Ooh, buddy, boy, we got some big stuff coming on $2 Late. So next month is the Pad crossover episode, the whole month of crossover. So last year we did The Wraith. This year, we've already announced it, but Zach, say it again. What are we doing this year?
Well, we went from fast cars to fast bikes with Harley Davidson and the Marlboro Man.
That's right.
And we are packing it in this month, upcoming month, with exclusive content. We do a fun segment. What does Dustin know? And instead of What Does Dustin Know, where I ask my co-host Dustin trivia questions, it's going to be What Does Dustin and Corey Know? And it's a fun discussion kind of centered around Harley Davidson and the Marlboro Man. Then
Dustin and I did much better this time than we did the year prior.
Yes, you did. Very well, because this one's a 90s movie, and Dustin, on record has said he's much better at 90s trivia than he is at 80s trivia. It's funny. I'm like, yeah, our podcast is 80s and 90s, by the way. And
so is this one.
Yes, exactly. And then we have an interview with Chelsea Field, who many would know as Tila from Masters of the Universe, and she did a really fun $2 6 questions segment, which is exclusive to
our Patreon, as well as a Why Does Zach Own This Harley Davidson and the Marlboro Man special edition, featuring Corey as well. A lot of Corey in the month of July.
I love
And
it.
so it's good stuff. It's good stuff. We just wrapped up Streets of Fire and have a ton of fun content in regards to Streets of Fire.
Tim, have you ever seen Streets of Fire?
No, I have not.
Oh, that's so 2/3 of the people here have not
Put
seen
that
Streets
on your
of Fire.
list too, dude. Yeah, I'm giving you homework as a former teacher. I'm giving you both homework. Watch it soon when you get a chance to, because we just interviewed Michael Pare for Streets of Fire, but we also interviewed Stoney Jackson. That's our newest interview that just dropped, actually.
Nice.
Stoney Jackson shares, I'll give you this little tease. Stoney Jackson, if he hadn't done a certain move in Streets of Fire, Michael Jackson would not be known for a certain dance move as well. And it's because of Stoney Jackson that Michael Jackson has his signature move.
Interesting.
And he tells the whole story behind it. It's wild. I did not know this about him. The guy's been in entertainment since the 70s, and he's a great storyteller. And I'm like, why is there not a Sorrells movie that followed up after Streets of Fire? You'll just have to listen to the interview. After you see the movie, you got to see the movie.
And Tim
first.
and I were like, we have no idea what you're talking about. Sorrells, sure.
I mean, look. As far as Carpenter Factors are concerned, we will get to Walter Hill down the road.
I think we
Walter
will,
Hill
yeah.
is a filmmaker, very much like John Carpenter, 100% original in his movies. 100%. Later on in life, he made movies that either a sequel or a remake or whatever. But his 80s stuff, late 70s, early 80s stuff, nothing can beat that. You put that with Carpenter's shit at that time too, and it's just like knocks it out of the park, just like The Fog did with all three of us.
Yeah.
That just sparked a memory. The Walter Hill. I remember a quote from him where he was saying all he wanted to make was Westerns, but Hollywood didn't want Westerns. So he just hid his Western in other movies. And
Yep.
that's kind of like similar. You mentioned, Zach, just something about Carpenter, and his Westerns. If you strip everything away from The Fog and put it to its basic core element of what the story is, you could say it's like a gang of gunslingers coming into a town to take revenge on people who wronged them. The Fog at its core could be a Western if you went that direction with it.
It's very insightful.
And that almost puts Captain Blake and all them as the protagonists, possibly of the film. All right, let's rewind. We're going to start the conversation all over again and go back to the beginning, because that's some good insight, buddy. You're not wrong there. Tim, you got to watch Assault on Precinct 13, man. It is so fucking good, and I think
That's
It's
your
on the
Western
list.
Rio
It's
Bravo.
on the
I
list.
think you'll see,
Yep. I'm gonna watch
a lot of
that.
the Western influence.
I'm going to watch Day of the Condor, and I'm going to watch Streets of Fire.
3 days of the Condor.
Oh, 3 days.
yeah,
3 days of the Condor. Okay.
Trust me, the first 30 minutes of that movie are the best part.
And I
I'm
got to
down,
watch
man. I'm
Manchurian
down.
Candidate, but I will
No, you
not
don't.
watch. I will not watch Night of the Creeps until we do it on the podcast, whether it's Zach's pick or mine. It will show up on Podcasting After Dark
Fair
at
enough.
some point. Yeah. But I love doing this with you guys. This was so much fun. I always love digging into the Carpenter Factor with you, Zach, and I always love talking to you, Tim. Podcasting with you, my man. We
What a
don't do it
blast.
enough, but it's a lot of fun.
Same here,
And,
guys. Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming on the show. Thank you for taking the time out of your night for doing this. And yeah, man, everybody go check out $2 late fee. Go check out Talking Back. Go check out everything on the BFOP network. Action, Return, Revenge, Resurrection. People Don't Forget, Blast from Our Past podcast. Throwback Trivia Takedown, Comics Underground, and Cartwright, a Seinfeld podcast. Oh, real quick for Cartwright, a Seinfeld podcast. So I don't know if you guys watched the interview with Jamie Lee Curtis it's not like a new interview on the Blu-ray. It's old. It's around 1980 when the movie was made. Her hair looks like when Kramer and Jerry and all them got the low flow showers because it just falls down. My God, 1980 hairstyle was absolutely atrocious. But if you like Seinfeld, go check out Cartwright Seinfeld podcast. And as always,
we'll catch you on the Carpenter side.
Be sure to subscribe to Podcasting After Dark and give us a 5-star rating on iTunes. Support Podcasting After Dark on Patreon. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Podcasting After Dark. And visit us next time for another installment of Podcasting After Dark with Corey Stevenson and Zach Schaefer.